Okay, so we're back with hour 2. We're building our single page application with Angular. So the first thing we're going to do, kind of a bit of opposite from what I've done the other couple days. The other couple days we've been adding drinks first. What I think we're going to do is create an simple Angular file, and we're going to seed it with a few initial values so that when our page first loads, we'll already have some drinks in our list, and then we'll write our add and remove functions after. So the first thing we're going to do is inside my JavaScript is let's create an Angular file, so just a JS file. So we'll create a new JavaScript file, and we'll call it drinks.js. So we have 2 files called drinks. One of them is our HTML page. One of them is our Angular file. So inside of our Angular file, we need to create an Angular application and an Angular controller. So we did this last week. So let's call this the Drinks app. And we'll have no dependencies. So this module does not depend on any other library. Next week, we're going to need a dependency in here. Angular has a routing file. So far, we've been handling routing in Express, our node controllers. Next week, we build a full stack application. We use the Angular to route the URLs instead. So we're going to need an Angular router file we'll have to download, and that'll be a dependency of our Angular module next week. We don't need it yet this week. And then inside here, we're going to create a controller, which we'll call the drinks controller. And will be initialized with a callback function. So we are creating an app and controller here. Now we need to connect these up to our HTML. So we're going to want a directive that attaches the application, another Angular directive that attaches the controller, and we just need to link the script file in. Right now we've built this file, but it's not connected up. So where should we make the link? Where in our HTML page should the link to our drinks JavaScript go? Where would we put it? Down, okay. How far down?
After. If we discover it didn't matter.
Well, why does it have to go after? Right, because we're writing Angular code in our script file. So this requires Angular. So this is our custom Angular script. This is our Angular library. It has to come after because it depends on Angular. So we'll just link that file in. And now we also want to tie some of their HTML elements to our Angular file so we can use. So what 2 directives do we need to add to our page to connect them to our module and controller in our JavaScript file? Yep, ng app and ng model. Now, we could put them in a few different places. Where do you think it makes sense to put them? We could put them up here, meaning the entire DOM, all the elements could use it. We don't necessarily need to. What would be our other options? Yeah, maybe the main, because all of our, everything to do with Angular is going to happen in here, right? It's got both our form for adding as well as our list for displaying. So maybe the main tag's not a bad place. So we'll add an ng app, which is our drinks app. And we can actually add the ng controller to the same tag, to our main tag. And our ng controller is our drinks controller. So now every element inside of main is accessible to our Angular code. So we'll add those two directives. Actually, in Angular 2, these things are gone. We don't have model and controller. They've moved to a very different model, which they call a component model. It's quite different. So now I'll just save this. We shouldn't see any changes yet on our form, but now our form should be linked. If I refresh. Looks okay if I view the source and just click again to verify my link works. That's good. We're loading the file properly. So now we want to, in our controller, we'll create an initial drinks list. So we could either initialize it as empty, as I said, that's what I've done in the last couple classes, but we'll actually put a few drinks in. So when the page loads, there's something actually in our list right away. I actually forgot one parameter in this callback. Now, if this was an express controller, a node controller, what three parameters do we have in our callback? Yeah. Now, we said last week, Angular doesn't use rec and res. It has one object that kind of combines them, which is what? Right. Thank you, Shubham. It's our scope variable. So remember, it's two-way. So we can put something into the scope from our HTML, but we can also read something out of the scope into our HTML. So we'll just declare that $ scope parameter. So what I want to do is create an array. I'll call it scope.drinks. And we can initialize it. What drinks are we putting in our liquor store this week? What are we drinking? Tonight's the end of your week. If you go out for a drink, what are you ordering? We'll just go with Smirnoff Ice, a little shorter, okay? Anybody else? What are you ordering tonight? Okay. And be a little more specific, Molson. All right. My syntax is probably not so good. Maybe I need to do it this way. Hang on. Do I need square brackets? Yes, sorry. So there's our initial drink list. Put in whatever values you like. Now, we don't actually need to pass this array to our HTML. Like in Express, we would need to pass this as a parameter when we render a view. Remember, the scope is two-way. So our HTML automatically has access So which element, which HTML element in the DOM within our NG app and NG controller, which element are we going to bind to that drinks array? Yeah, well, actually, instead of the list, it's actually the LI. Okay. And if we look at last week, I've kind of pulled up the video we watched last week. And you can see how they do it. Look at line 16. We don't even need a for loop or a for each. What Angular function are we going to use within that li tag in order to bind it to our drink list? Yeah, we're going to use an ng-repeat directive. And this code is like our for each, right? We can have item in drinks or drink in drinks, whatever we like. It also has, and you may remember from the video last week, that ng-repeat has the ability to filter, so to write a where clause if we want to, or to write an order by. That's built right into that Angular directive, which is kind of neat. So if we add an ng-repeat onto our li, it should automatically bind it to our list, our drinks array. Let's try it. So in here, we'll add an ng-repeat. Maybe I'll just call it, I don't know, D in drinks. So D representing the current item in the array. Drinks. So this name here has to match exactly what we've called that array here. Otherwise, we're going to get an error. Okay, well, what does the word repeat suggest to you it does? What does the word repeat mean? Yeah, that's the Angular loop structure. It's like a for loop or a for each. So if this was PHP, we'd have for each D in drinks. This is just the Angular shorthand for that. Okay. So now if I refresh, okay, well, notice I'm getting 4 elements. So it's binding to my list because we've got 4 elements, but it isn't actually, the one thing we forgot to do, we're not actually displaying the drink. We're creating the list items, but if I inspect these, the list item tags are going to be empty. So I have list items, but there's nothing inside of them to display. So this is where we need to just use inside of our li. How do we output an Angular value? We did it last week. Yeah, we use the handlebars or the mustache syntax. And what variable represents the current element in the array? Yeah, our D. So if we refresh now, we should get the array values being printed out inside those list items. Cool. I'll just push this up to Git. Jesse, you can buy me coffee later to thank me. May as well create my repo now anyway. Come on. Okay, files, if you need them, they're on GitHub, lesson 11, COMP2068, lesson 11 Friday.
When I did that, it just displays the D element.
Okay, so that means one of two things is happening. Either your main section is not properly wired up to your Angular file, or your array, there's something wrong with your array because it can't properly represent the elements in the array. Has to be one or the other. Let's also add here, while we're working with our list, I think my files are here now on Git. Yep, files are here if you need them. We want to display a number here. So whatever the current size of our drink list is, we want that number to appear before the word current with a space. So how could we do that on this line, on line 23? Yeah, okay, we don't even need a directive, right? We just need a handlebar syntax here. So what Angular value would tell us how big our list is? What's the name of the list? Yeah, what's the name of the list? Drinks. Dot. Ash, I think you had it. There we go. There's our length property. Cool. And then we just want to make sure we put a space after it. So there's a space after that number and before the word current. Remember, it's two-way data binding. So this will always, our drinks array is always displayed. The current value of that array is always displayed in our HTML. So there we go. When it loads, we've got 4. Just by adding drinks.length. And as we add or remove, because our page in scope always tracks the current value of our array, that number will always update automatically and stay current. Add an element to the array, that number will change. Remove an element from the array, the length changes. So now let's deal with our add form. We want to be able to add a new drink, send that drink value to Angular, and have Angular appended on to the end of our array, which will update our list and update the size of the list. So we're going to need 2 Angular directives here. We're going to need one on our text box, similar to what we did last week. What directive do we need on our inputs to tie the value to Angular? Think about our calculator. Last week we had X, we had operator, we had Y. Yeah, so we're going to add an ng model attribute, and we may as well call it drink name, because that's consistent with the ID and the name of the input. So in effect, we're creating a new Angular variable called drink name that we'll have access to inside of our Angular file, just like we did last week, right? And that's part of the scope. So last week we had an input for X, an input for op, and an input for Y, and we could reference them all in our little calculator with scope.x, scope.y, and scope.op. Now we also need an Angular directive on our form. We could do it in one of two places. We could either put it on our button or we could put it on our form. I'm going to put it on the form so that it interrupts the regular form submission process. We don't want the whole page to reload. So the directive we're going to use here is ng-submit. For some reason, doesn't come up in my code prompt. I don't know why, but it will still work. It will still work. So on ng-submit, we want to call an Angular function. So let's just, what's a descriptive name for our function? What do you want to call the function that should run? Seems like a good name. So instead of our form submitting the entire page to the server, we're going to interrupt it and send that form to our add drink function that we're going to write in our controller. Add drink's going to be really simple. It's basically going to be a function declaration with 2 lines of code in it. So all we want to do is create this function. We're going to need to access the drink name variable in the scope and add that element to our array. We don't have to refresh the list. Angular refreshes it in real time, automatically, which is kind of cool. Okay, so we've added ng-submit on our form, and we've added ng-model to our input. So Angular will be able to access the value in the text box. So let's go back to our JavaScript file, and inside our controller, we'll write an add drink scope variable, which is equal to our anonymous function. So very similar to the calculate function we wrote last week. We'll take our array. Now, the array methods in JavaScript are different from the array methods you would be used to in Java. What method would you call if this was a Java program? What method do you call to add an element to an array in Java? Yeah, you call the add method. It's not here, right? The method we need is actually visible in my code prompt right now. There's a few other methods here, not many. But notice there's no add, there's no delete, there's no remove. Yeah, push is the JavaScript equivalent. So push, what value are we pushing to the array? Yep, so how do we refer? We don't actually use the text box name. We're using the ng-model name instead. Except it's part of the scope. Remember, if this was Node, it would be request.body. The name of the input. In Angular, we access it with scope dot and then our ng-model name. And here, notice my code prompt, it recognizes that as a scope level variable because we gave that an Angular directive of ng-model. So that adds the current value of our drink name variable into our array. That's it. Now our list should get updated automatically. Let's try it. So I'll refresh. What else should we add to our list? What are you ordering tonight? Okay. There we go. Notice the page didn't reload. The title doesn't flicker in the browser. As soon as I click add drink, it shows up here and my number updates. If I add something else, I can just keep adding. Now we have one, this is functional, we have one little user interface issue. What else should we do after adding an item to the list? Yeah, let's clear out the text box. So after we add it, if we want to add something else, it's annoying for the user to have to go back and wipe it out. Now, if I refresh, those last two items are going to be gone, right? Because we're initializing our list as 4 drinks. So after we add it to the array, how do we clear the text box? Yeah, and what do we need before drink name? So scope dot drink name. You could try dot clear. Think we'll just set it to an empty string. So we're grabbing the value from our model, adding it to our array, and then we're clearing out. Because remember, our text box, it binds 2 ways. Here we're reading the value from the scope, and here we're setting the value from the scope. So once we've added that value to our list, we want to get rid of that initial text box value. So this should clear it out. Let's try that again. Now my model is clear. The value of the model is removed once it's added to the list.
So I don't know if it's like above in Angular or above what we're doing, but if you go into add a new drink and you put water and you press enter and you add it, and then if you add water again, it'll say it'll add another drink, but it won't actually print it out.
Thank you for mentioning that. We're going to do that. That was exactly what I wanted to do next. So our list is working. Sakura mentioned a good point. What if we now add the same element? It says 6, but it's not here. Now, if we inspect this, in our console, we actually got an error. And here's the error. It's a little hard to see. ng repeat dupes. So our ng repeat works fine as long as the elements are unique. If we look up exactly what that means, duplicate key. So the problem is we can put it in our array, right? It says our array is 6 elements long, but ng repeat requires some kind of unique value. So it can't represent that. Now we have a workaround for this. It's fairly simple. And we're going to need this workaround because then the last thing we want to do is add a remove button. And again, if Angular doesn't have a way to uniquely identify the elements, it won't know which one to remove. So, not sure if we see it in the video. Did they have it? No, they don't. Okay. So in our ng repeat, we can actually add this, track by, and we'll create a variable called index. So in effect, Angular is, the ng repeat is paying attention from 0 to the number of items in the list. This way it can uniquely identify the items even if the text value is the same. if we add this track by index, which is guaranteed to be unique, now if we should refresh, you should be able to add duplicates. So that's a handy debugging trick when we're working with front-end JavaScript and Angular. If things aren't working right, check your console, and you're likely going to see errors here. So let's refresh. Now I'm going to add something that's already here. No problem this time.
Also, I don't know if I'm missing something. Button doesn't actually work. Like, I'm pressing enter for the button doesn't. Like for adding.
Has something to do with either your form tag or your button tag. So have a look at line 16 or 19.
Oh, okay. My bootstrap automatically put in type equals button, and for some reason that made it not work.
Because did you use an input tag instead of a button tag?
No, like button, and then it said type equals button.
So yeah, type equals button is pre-HTML5. We would put in an input type equals button, and those don't do anything except what you code them to do. So they don't actually submit the form. So it doesn't work because your form's never being submitted.
Kind of weird how that. It's button, but now it doesn't work.
Take out type equals button.
Yeah, that didn't work.
So the last thing we want to do, we have added an add drink. We also want a delete drink or remove drink function. So on our form, we want some red delete buttons here. And then when we click them, we're going to call another function in our controller. We'll use the index. We'll need to tell Angular which element to delete based on the index. We can't tell it based on the text value because we may have duplicates. So we'll use that index value for delete. So inside my LI, after we've displayed the drink, I'll put in another button. Give it a class of BTN danger, and have it say delete. So if we reload our page, we should now get in our list the red delete button beside the name of every drink. And then we'll need to wire that up to an Angular method. Now we don't actually need a form here because we're not submitting any value to Angular. So it doesn't matter that this button is outside of the form. So it will look like this. Yeah, I don't like that very much. So what I'm going to do, we're going to put our little D variable. Let's put it in a label, and we'll give that label a bootstrap class so that they'll all be the same width. So our delete buttons will align over here. Will look a lot better. So before my D tag, I'll just put in a couple blank lines. I'll put in a label and give it a class of call SM3. Should be wide enough. And then I'll drag my closing tag down here. So our drink name appears inside of this label, and that label's 3 columns wide. Or I'll maybe make it 4 to handle a really long drink name, like Smirnoff Ice with raspberry. So this should align all of our delete buttons, stack them one on top of the other so they look better. So we've just wrapped this value inside of an opening and closing label tag and use Bootstrap to format it. Will give us this now. That's better. Now clicking these right now doesn't do anything. So we're going to write a remove function where we'll identify the index and we'll just remove that item from the array. And the list again will update automatically. Then the other thing we'll do is just add a little confirmation onto it to make sure the user gets a message. Are you sure you want to delete it? So we're going to add a directive on the button. Up here, we added it on our form submit. We could have also added our Angular directive to run our add drink right on the button. Both would work. Here, we don't have a form to submit. So we're just going to use ng directive is ng click. So when the element is clicked, what should we call our function? We've got add drink. Yeah, maybe we'll call it remove drink or delete drink. So now when any one of those buttons is clicked, we want to call remove drink in our controller. Well, that function doesn't exist. If we click it right now, we're going to get an error. We won't see the error, but if you look in your console, we'll get a JavaScript error saying that method doesn't exist. So we'll just add our Angular directive here to our delete button. So now we'll just jump back to our controller. We're almost done. So after our add drink, we'll create a scope.remove drink. So in this case, we're going to access our array. What method will do a remove? It's not too obvious from the names. Good guess. It's actually not reduce. Splice is the name. So splice takes two parameters. So the first one is what index, which element in the array, and that's where we can use our index variable. So that would be this .index. So that refers to the element in the array we want to remove. There's another required parameter. Oh, it actually says it's optional, so we could leave it out. I think we want to specify one. We better check this for a minute. I don't know if we don't specify if it will delete all the elements starting at that element. Well, I guess we'll try it and see. Does? So if you don't specify, it deletes everything thereafter. So we want to say only delete this one element. Don't delete the rest of the array. So now we should be able to remove a drink, and then we'll just add a JavaScript confirmation. We'll add that right in here with vanilla JavaScript. We don't need to use jQuery like we did previously. So now if we refresh and delete something, it just goes away. We could even go right down to 0, and it will show 0 when the array is empty. If I refresh, our list comes back. So the one other thing we should do is we should make sure we give the user a confirmation. So we can just wrap this command in an if statement. Don't do the remove right away. Don't do the splice. We'll just use our confirm function. This is a built-in kind of old school, plain old JavaScript function. Confirm. So we can say So then we'll open a set of curly braces and we'll move our splice function in here. So splice only executes if our confirm function returns true, which happens if the user clicks the OK button. Right? Confirm automatically generates a pop-up modal dialog with this message and an OK cancel. Cancel will return false, and OK will return true. So a user clicking on any red delete button is going to get this message first. And if they click OK, it returns true, and then our delete runs. If they click cancel, that will return false, so nothing happens. So now we get our pop-up. Cancel will return false, and OK returns true. And our delete runs. We could scale this down pretty well. Our column formatting doesn't quite scale to size, but not bad. You could try that out on your mobile device if you uploaded it to a server somewhere. I think if we made those labels a little wider, it would still work. We'll make them half the page. Yeah, needs a little more formatting. So there's our completed single page app. The only thing we didn't do was allow someone to actually edit. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give you lab 6. You have the rest of the class to work on the lab. If you need to submit it by tonight, you can submit it by tonight. Many of you will be able to finish it in the time remaining in class. So next week, we're going to build this same application. It's going to look like this, except we're also going to add the ability to update, but it's going to be not an HTML application. We're going to actually work with our Node application that's using MongoDB and our current drink list. But we're going to use Angular for the front end. So instead of having different EJS views, we're going to do this all on one page where we can view the list, we can add, we can edit, we can delete. And we only have to load that page one time. So we're going to do, our code's going to be similar to this, but we're also going to move all of the routing, all of the router gets and posts. Those things are going to come out of our Node controller, and they're going to go into our Angular controller. And we're going to use Angular to handle those routes. So Angular, we're basically going to sit in the middle. So we're adding another layer to our application. We're going to have to write more code, but we're going to be able to do it all on one page and give the user a better experience by doing it that way. So all our Node controller is really going to do is pass JSON back and forth from the database. It'll pass JSON to Angular. Angular will handle the routing and pass the data to our HTML. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you lab 6. You have the rest of the time to work on it. I'll stay. You're free to ask for help with the lab. Okay, and also a reminder about your upcoming work. Assignment 2 is due next Thursday night. So please make sure you've deployed and submitted by next Thursday. Okay, and you also need to start working, figuring out what you're going to do for your presentation. So talk to your group members. And remember, keep a log of the time you're spending on the presentations because you do need to submit that, and that counts towards your mark. Okay, I'm going to push this to Git. So all the files are here. I'm going to stop our stream. So you're free to take a break. I'm just actually going to give you lab 6, show you lab 6.